Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So, what does good use of AI look like? That is what I will be talking through today. My name is Jason Maude. I am the Chief Technology Advocate of Starling Bank, which means I go around and talk about technology. I talk about technology and our technology philosophy, how we apply it in order to create the great technology that drives Starling Bank. And what I will be doing here is talking about specifically how that technology and technology philosophy works in relation to AI, and talking to you about the underpinnings that you're going to need if you want to deploy AI successfully at your organization. So there are three things here that I really want to talk about. And I'm going to get in with the first principle that I want to introduce is the question of why AI? Why are you using AI? This is the first question that you have to ask yourself. Now, obviously, when you're approaching a new project or revamping an existing system, you might consider, let's start using AI. AI is good here. Now, obviously, you might have a business case for, developing that new project or that new system, but you really have to ask yourself, not only, is it worth investing in this at all, but why are we investing specifically in AI, machine learning, any tool like that? It can be very easy to get sucked into the hype around AI and start going, well, we need to use it, right? We have to use AI. And there's a lot of stuff out there asking, are you AI ready? How are you using AI? How are you using predictive models? How are you using LLMs, etc., etc.? All of this jargon and terminology and hype gets thrown out at you. But at the end of the day, AI is a tool. And like all tools, I'm an engineer by background, so I'm very interested in correct use of tools. And like all tools, the question you should be asking yourself is this the right tool for the job, right? Is this the tool that we want to use? If I came up to you guys and said, how is your organization using hammers? Are you using hammers correctly? Are you hammer ready? How have you deployed hammers in your organization, right? This would be seen as a bit weird. You use hammers where hammers are needed to be used, right? It would be a bit weird for me to come along and insist that you had to use hammers. And yet with AI, we're perfectly content with people standing up and saying, how are you using AI? The correct answer to how are you using AI is we're using AI where it makes sense to use AI, right? And AI is a tool just like a hammer. It is a very complex tool. It's a tool that requires a lot of expertise to use properly. It is a tool that requires a lot of continuous improvement and development and monitoring. But at the end of the day, it is just a tool. So you need to ask yourself, when you're deploying any new program or project and you're considering AI, can we do it without AI? What's the benefit that doing this with AI brings to us, right? What you don't want is to develop an AI system that isn't really needed and you don't really have the skills to maintain and is too difficult and complex, and then gets thrown in the bin along with your blockchain-based system or any other hype-based system that you have developed. If an executive or board member or someone high up is coming to you and asking, how are we using AI? Don't worry, they'll be worried about quantum computing next week, so you don't need to particularly panic about the hype. So, first principle here, good use of AI considers AI as a tool and uses it in the situations where it is appropriate to use, and has considered the possibility that maybe we don't actually need it, and we can put it away and do something else. So that's principle number one. Second up, you need good fundamental data control, data quality in order to use AI properly. Now, a lot of the data control and data quality that you need in order to use AI is something that you can deal with, that you can deploy anyway, right, in order to be good data stewards of the, presumably immense amount of data that we are all dealing with, and increasing amount of data. So there are a lot of good principles contained in, things like what you need to do for GDPR and so on, about knowing what data you have available to you, knowing where it's stored, knowing what the golden source of truth for a particular piece of data is, that is very important, right, and will serve you well whether you are using AI or not. But when it comes to AI, you have to go further than that. So first up, you have to have the data set up, as it, the foundations there. But then you have to go beyond. You have to start asking questions about what data you are feeding in to your AI models to train them and test them. How are you developing that? So there is a lot of discipline that goes on around data that is absolutely necessary to have good use of AI. A lot of the time, people are very concerned about getting good data scientists. And as concerned you are in your organization about getting good data scientists, you should be twice as concerned about getting good data engineers, the people who will sit there and make sure that the data is properly cleaned, that the pipelines between different systems are well maintained, that you can transfer the data between those different systems. Because without that good data engineering, without that good fundamental translation between the different places, there's no way that you can get the science on top to give you anything useful. Indeed, the science will produce, the old phrase is garbage in, garbage out. Unless you can have that good fundamental underpinning, that good data engineering, you won't be able to get the data science on top. Well, once the data scientists have got to the data, once the data is clean and good, the scientists need to start asking questions like, what data do we need to train this model? How much data do we need, right? Can we rely simply on the data we have, or do we need to create data? Do we need pseudo-data to be created in order to train this model correctly? If we are creating pseudo-data, then does that pseudo-data need to be, how does that pseudo-data get created in a way that does not unnecessarily bias the model? How do we make sure that the pseudo-data looks realistic? If, for example, you are training a model to spot fraud, the vast majority in a set of transactions, the vast majority of transactions aren't fraudulent. So you can't train your model on a representative sample, because then it will just ignore most of the transactions and say, well, most transactions aren't fraudulent, so I'll never find fraud. But the problem is, if you then try and train it on, a balance of fraudulent and non-fraudulent transactions, the problem then becomes that you may not have enough fraudulent transactions in order to be able to train the model correctly. So you might need to create some. This is the pseudo-data. But if you create those transactions, are you unnecessarily biasing towards one particular type of fraud, one particular view of fraud? Are you biasing your model to look for those and not for others? This is the sort of difficulty that you have to get round with the data. And you have to spend 90% of your time developing these machine learning models, getting the data correct and making sure that it looks good and works well. And that is where the bulk of the work is. This also means, this leads me on to my third principle, because a lot of the time data doesn't stay the same. It's not static. What the data represents moves on. People will perform more transactions, different transactions. Usage patterns will change. Other patterns will change, and so on and so on. Things will change. Things will become different, and so you have to make sure that you know whether your model is still relevant. So the third principle here is that you have to have excellent monitoring of your models. Right? You have to be able to keep your models under your watchful eye constantly. The interesting thing here is making sure that you have a good understanding of what the model is meant to do and what bounds it is meant to operate under. Because if you don't understand what bounds the model is meant to operate under, there's no way you can say whether it's doing the right thing or not. So you have to, and this leads all the way back to the first principle, you have to know why you're using AI, you have to know what the purpose of it is, so that you can then put around, the monitoring around it to monitor whether it is still fulfilling that purpose correctly. And you have to work out, under what circumstances you would like to keep using the model, and under what circumstances it has strayed outside the bounds of safety. Now, machine learning models can, and occasionally do, change very quickly from a position where they're worthwhile and are producing useful outputs into a position where they no longer are, where they have strayed outside those bounds very quickly. So this monitoring that you're doing can't just be once every so often. You can't go in and say, well, we'll monitor it once every quarter or what have you. You have to monitor it on a continual basis. You have to have that continuous monitoring around the model to show, when it's starting to stray outside what you want, because it can very quickly stray outside of bounds if circumstances change, or if the model encounters a set of situations that it really hasn't been trained on. And then you need to be able to very quickly retrain the model and redeploy a new version. If it's going to take you 6 months worth of development time, planning time, sign-off, UAT, etc., to get to the point where you want to deploy a new model, then maybe AI is not for you, because maybe you won't be able to respond correctly in order to make sure that it is still operating within the bounds that you want it to operate within. At the very least, you should consider some sort of non-AI, non-ML-based backup that you can switch back to if it turns out that your AI system very rapidly degrades. So, those 3 principles again that you need to consider. First off, why are you using AI here? Not only what the overall business case is, but why is it that you want AI for this business use case rather than a simpler, less intensive tool? Secondly, you need to have the data right. You not only need to consider the sort of the fundamentals of the data that you have at the low level, you also need to consider whether you have correct sample sizes and the right sort of data to train and test the models that you are building. And thirdly, you need to monitor these models, keep hawkish eyes on them, because they can very quickly degrade, go out of the bounds of safety, and you need to be able to respond very quickly if they do that. And if you keep those 3 principles in mind, then hopefully you will be able to build, use, procure, whichever your preferred method is, of bringing AI into your organization and making it a force for good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. Covered a tremendous amount in a short period of time there. We can go to any questions now, if there are any from the room, immediately at the front there. If we could keep these relatively short and sharp, I'd be very grateful.
Hi, I'm Animesh from Infosys. I just wanted to understand, you said that, identifying an AI actually approach from a use case perspective is first important, right? where do you see the use of it more often? So is it more internal-based use cases or external-based use cases?
A lot of the time, it's internal-based use cases, and the reason for that being that once you start exposing the AI directly to customers and have it learn directly off what customers do, you can get into a very dangerous position. And the reason is that, as numerous examples that you can find will show, customers are allowed to do things that organizations are not. And if you've put your AI in front of customers and got it to learn from what customers do, then it can learn to do things that customers are allowed to do, but we are not. There is the famous example of the AI bot that got released on Twitter and learned how to become a Nazi, right? For example, that's something that we wouldn't want to do, but customers or random users on Twitter are allowed to do. So mostly it's internal use cases rather than external ones.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Jason, I could listen to you talk all afternoon, but if I did that, I'd get in more trouble with the producers than when I played a Taylor Swift song in front of my daughter that wasn't a Taylor's version. It was not pleasant. Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.